أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن ألف الله لا نزل عليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه وأنزل التوراة والإنجيل وأنزل التوراة والإنجيل من قبل هدى للناس وأنزل الفرقان وأنزل الفرقان الذين كفروا بآيات الله لهم عذاب شديد والله عزيز ذو انتقام. إن الله لا يخفى عليه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء. هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء. 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 لا العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي يصوركم في الأرحام كيف يشاء. لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك لربك وانحر أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس. قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم الأمين. ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. رحم الله من يقرأ والفاتحة مع الإخلاص والصلوات. اللهم صل على
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. As always, not just for this night, but all of the nights, Jazakallah khair. May Allah reward you eternally for the beautiful, powerful, and mesmerizing recitation of the Holy Quran. when you recited Surah Al-Kawthar, the final verse, the one who hates you has been cut off, the one who hates Rasulullah. Look at the Banu Umayyah, the Banu Abbas. They were so powerful. They had empires that stretched from east to west. Where are they today? They've been cut off, just like the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas the Banu Hashim, they are in abundance. This is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He wills something. Even if you feel powerful in the moment, down the span of history it can mean nothing. And even if you feel powerless, down the line you can inspire billions and billions. And that's what Imam al-Hussain did. Inshallah, we'll proceed to the next segment. I would like to invite Brother Mustafa Bismi to deliver a short presentation for the night. Please welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I would like to start off by saying, thank you, Brother Hussain, for giving me this opportunity to talk tonight. I'd like to thank our dear Qari. Brother Hussain and I were talking about how lucky we are to have you. And your style is so unique, and it's so beautiful the way you transition the tone of voice. It's very unique. Like Brother Hussain was mentioning, I love hearing that last verse of Surah Al-Kawthar. Inna shani'aka huwal abtar. It's indeed your enemies who will be cut off. It's very interesting because the Prophet's life was very difficult in the beginning, right? People slandered the Prophet. They called him the tailless man, the one without inheritance, right, is what it means. And then the Quran says, look how Rasulullah is he didn't have a son, but he had a daughter. And it is through Bibi Fatima al-Zahra that Allah passed on his lineage, and who will resurrect the word of Allah from the rise of the 12th Imam. And the return of the Sufyani will be cut off, right? Indeed, it is your enemies who will be cut off from sustenance. And that also reminds me of how this world is a prison for the believers, and it is a paradise for the disbelievers. This world, the believers are oppressed, and the tyrants are rejoicing. The Holy Prophet said, in the hereafter, the tyrants are the prisoners, and the believers are rejoicing. Tonight I want to talk about a continuation of yesterday's topic. And yesterday's topic was about, more so than just taqiyya, I think the deeper message here is how Muslims perceive what a Shia is, and how that perception could lead to misguidance. Something that I wasn't taught, and I wish someone taught me this earlier on. It is a concept about how saying you're the Shia of Ali, it's very empowering. And we say that because, Muslims, Shias, we've been the underdogs. We've been oppressed since day one. The Prophet passes away. His close companions, Salman, Abu Dhar, Bilal, some of them were exiled, some of them were killed for being a Shia. Till today, we're oppressed that way. And so, pronouncing to the world, I'm the Shia of Ali, it's very empowering, right? And you may think that there's no limit to that. This is what I found interesting. Well, I remember a speaker said, we are insane for the love of Ali. I always thought that was interesting. Insane for the love of Ali. I thought, if you look at his close companions, Abu Dhar and Salman, is that something that they would say? Insane for the love of Ali leads into a bit of fanaticism. You might think that it's like an endless limit, the love for Ahlul Bayt. How can it lead you to diversion? This is something that no one taught me about. Like we said yesterday, the Shi'as who said to Imam Hussain, Salamu alaikum, O degrader of the believers. Why is he saying that? Because he's saying, oh, you are not like your father Ali. He would not do that. It's his concept that the Shia is an unapologetic, stamps his foot, and makes no compromises. That is where the insane with the love of Ahlul Bayt can lead you to. And the Shias of the past have made this mistake, this unapologetic characteristic of, I will not compromise and withhold my belief at any point. And how that leads one astray. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam narrates, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He's narrating to Mu'alla. He says, O Mu'alla, conceal our cause and do not make it public. To those who conceals our cause and do not publicize it, Allah will honor in this world. He will make it a light between his eyes. By the way, light is insight. When God mentions sight and blindness, it's relating to insight. Basira, like Sheikh mentioned. He will make it a light between their eyes in this world and lead him to paradise. Just like God says they are blind in this world, we will make them blind in the hereafter. O Mu'alla, whoever publicizes our cause and does not conceal it, Allah will humiliate him in this world and remove the light between his eyes in the next. And will make darkness to lead him to the fire. Like I said, who is he talking about? Is he talking about Muawiyah's army? Is he talking about one of the caliphs? He's talking to his own Shia. O Mu'alla, Taqiyya is the religion, and the religion is my religion, and the religion of my predecessors. There is no religion for the one who does not observe Taqiyya. O Mu'alla, Allah loves to be worshipped secretly, just as He loves to be worshipped publicly. O Mu'alla, the one who publicizes our cause is the one who rejects it altogether. Now, how does that make sense? How can you reject the cause for publicizing it? It's like the two opposites, they conflict between each other. The reason why it's rejecting that statement is because he does not understand the weight of it. And he does not understand his purpose in applying it. That is like the one who rejects it. Now, like I was saying, this is more than just taqiyya. It's more than just like a title from a textbook. This is what taqiyya is. Taqiyya is da-da-da-da-da. This blends into how Shias perceive the ideal Shia in their mind. And this has spread into how people have gone and studied the religion, become scholars, and publicize and promote this sort of ideal Shia. You'll notice there are many different characteristics of Shias. And like I said, at the time of the Imams, you had people like Abu Dhar and Salman who knew how to apply this concealment of the secrets, who knew how to conceal their faith, and you had Shias who were open and publicized these secrets, this unapologetic Shia. It looks like that man's a brave man. It looks like he's Imam Shia of Ali. He looks like he doesn't apologize to anyone. He's a strong man. That's how we think. And the fool sees that and sees empowerment in that. Today and at the time of the Imams, there were scholars exactly like this. And those scholars who had followers exactly like this. The unapologetic Shia. This is what I want to talk to you tonight about. And how the impact of a scholar can lead a nation into guidance or mislead a nation into heresy. This is something that nobody taught me. And I wish I was sitting in the crowd listening to someone who taught me this years ago. I had to learn this by myself in the hadith and the Quran, and I'm surprised that this is strong guidance that the Imam has given at that time, but we have forgotten it. And I see brothers around me being misled into this heresy of being the unapologetic Shia. This is what I want to talk to you tonight about. The description of the evil scholar. This is something that has been hidden, explained by the Imam, but hidden amongst the Shias. We do not talk about what a corrupt scholar is and how can it mislead Muslims. You'll notice the hadith by the Holy Prophet. He says, the best among my people are the scholars. The worst among my people are the who? The scholars. He doesn't say the people who go to the pubs. He doesn't say the people who gamble. He doesn't say the people who kill. He doesn't say the people who this, that, this. Why is he saying the scholars? You don't think that. When you look at Qom, when you look at the grand houses, you don't think the worst people also walk through these gates. You don't think that. Who thinks like that? Right? Worse than the people who go down to King's Cross and whatever they have down there. Right? This is a very interesting point. Why is it that the scholar is of the worst of the people? There's all these other crimes people do. You know why? It's because he changes the perception of what guidance is. A crazy saying that I heard that blew my mind by Imam Sadiq. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Is when Imam Sadiq, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, let me talk to you about where they end up, the corrupt scholar. Is he forgiven a little bit? He did a lot of deeds. He's got a tasbih in his hand. Maybe that, accounts to something. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is narrating to his close companion. He says, there is a stone mill which grinds. He says, will you not ask me what it grinds in the hereafter, in the hellfire? Will you not ask me who's it grinding? The Imam says, it was said to him, what is the grind, O commander of the faithful? The Imam says, the corrupt scholar, the sinful reciter, and the unjust tyrant, the treacherous minister, and the lying official. Another saying says, there is a city in hell called the Fortified. Will you not ask me what is in it? Tell me what is in it, O commander of the faithful. Within it is the hands of the oath breakers. Now these are believers that can end up corruptified. They have the potential to be misguided. Right? One of the sayings by Imam Sadiq is when he says, wow, in the description of the evil scholar, this is crazy, and I guarantee you probably never heard this in your life, because it's never been talked about. They cause more harm to the weak ones from among our Shia than the army of Yazid to Imam Hussain. They do more harm, the Imam is saying, the corrupt scholar does more harm to our Shia than what Yazid did to Imam Hussain. When have you ever heard that? When have you ever heard someone say there are people worse and they do more harm than what Yazid did to Imam Hussain? That doesn't make sense. You hold up. Mustafa, what are you talking about? Yazid, what he did to Imam Hussain? We recite, Ala la'natullah qawma zalimeen. How can you be more evil than the devil? Right? The Imam responds, what Yazid did to Imam Hussain ibn Ali and his companions, he snatched away their lives, their property. What the evil scholars do, they enter doubt and obscurity into the hearts of the weak ones amongst our Shias and lead them astray. When you lead someone astray, he will go on to that cause. It's more dangerous than an IDF soldier or ISIS going to kill you. You're not influenced by that guy. You're not influenced by a Wahhabi sheikh. But a corruptible scholar with a silver tongue, and he's talking about Hussain ibn Ali, whoa, he's one of me. He seems like someone I should follow. Yeah? When he beats his chest and he holds a flag of being an unapologetic Shia, it looks like he's someone to follow. And this is who the Imam is talking about. Why is the Imam talking about? Who is he talking about? He's talking about Shia scholars. Just think about that. The corrupted Shia scholar, and he's advising his Shias to be aware of this. And as saying by Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, look, he's talking to his close companion, look how many corrupt scholars there are witnessed before your eyes. And look how many ignorant worshippers there are flocking towards them. When you understand what is the ideal Shia, it is a very rare thing. People who think for themselves and observant, and as a result of their intellect, it is a barrier, a protection against misguidance. It's a very rare thing. People don't like to think for themselves. They're easily misled. The Holy Prophet says the worst are the evil scholars. Right? But here's the thing. Here's what I want to talk to you about. Don't just hear this and then go around spreading and guiding people openly. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says, even if a scholar is corrupt, even if a scholar is, ignorant, don't shame him. For you will be seen as a unreligious person. You'll be seen as a corrupt, wicked person. Because some scholars may hold masses of people. And openly shaming them, people will perceive you as a wicked person, right? I'm telling you this, I'm not naming names or anything like that. I'm telling you this because this guidance needs to be, it cannot be said that this knowledge, this information is withheld, but it cannot be so apparent that it is causing, strife between the communities. It still needs to be talked about. This unapologetic Shia is a movement that has happened at the time of the Imam, and it is something that is continuing till today. And it's interesting because when the Imam comes, you have all these different characters amongst the Shias. Each one of them, by the way, they don't say, when the Imam comes, I'm not going to follow him. Each one of them says he's going to follow them. Each one of the different types of Shias, you have this Shia, the Imam mentions there are 3 types of Shia, Imam mentions the 4 types of Shia. Each one of them, they're all going to say, I'm going to follow the Mahdi. Guess what? ISIS says that themselves. We're awaiting the Imam, the 12th Imam. ISIS says they're awaiting the Mahdi. All of them say that. Of course, nobody's going to say, no, I don't wait for the Mahdi. You know who the first to reject the Mahdi? Do you know who they are? Do you know what the hadith is of Imam as-Sadiq? The first to reject the Mahdi, what do you think? It's the adulterers, the wine drinkers and this, that? No. The Imam says the first to reject the Mahdi are the scholars. Do you ever think about that? You know why? Like I said, their perception of being a Shia is one thing. The reality is it's something else. When that something else shows up, that's not what I was waiting for. I was waiting for something else. You'll notice when our grand scholars have given rulings, you have Ayatollah Sistani, you have Ayatollah Khamenei giving a ruling about do not openly curse and slander the wives of the Prophet and the companions and the revered figures amongst the Muslims. That immediately caused conflict between Shias. There's a lot of Shias that said, you are the weak one. Just like the Shia said to Imam al-Hassan, you're degrading me. Why? Because his perception of being a Shia is something different to what it actually should be. When people talk about preparation for the Imam, when have you ever heard someone talk about this? This is some hardcore wisdom I'm dropping right here. It's something that people don't understand. That everyone, different characteristics amongst the 300 million Shias, they have their own perception of what the Imam is. That's a very dangerous thing. Because if he doesn't meet up to that expectation, all of a sudden, whoa, you're not the guy I was waiting for. The Mahdi is a name, man. It's a goddamn word. Everybody has their own perception of what the Mahdi is. You ever see evangelical Christians? Talk about Jesus and you're thinking, bro, that's not the Jesus I thought about. They're waiting for another Jesus to come. One that's passing around the donation box too much. Their perception is that Jesus flies in a private jet. Isn't that right, Sheikh? The perception is a extravagant, wealthy person. Bro, Prophet Isa, man, his roof was a night sky. His bed was made of hay and his rock was a pillow. This is Nabi Isa. People have changed the perception of who Prophet Isa is. And that's who they're waiting for, man. If you look at these evangelical preachers, that's how they perceive being a religious person is. Corrupt is their soul. When Imam Ali talks about the evil scholars, they confiscate their lives, these Christians. Forgotten is the message of Isa. This is what the Imam is saying about the evil scholars within our communities. They change the perception of who the Imam is. And so when the ruling of our grand scholars, our grand Maharajas are given, they reject it. Because their perception of who they're waiting for is different. I wanted to talk about this because ever since I was a young boy, I was interested in psychology and how it's implemented in the religion and how it could be used to understand the Imam and his Shia. And it's something I want you to think about when you go home. How is your perception of the Imam? And read about how the Imam defines his ideal Shia. With that, I'd like to conclude. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Thank you, bro.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Jazakallah khair, Brother Mustafa. It's always a pleasure to have you. What you mentioned about the dichotomy between preachers of Christ and what Christ actually was, what he actually taught, how he actually lived, that actually brought a video to mind on YouTube. It's called GOP Jesus. It's a pretty interesting one, worth watching. Very same thing with Muslims, as you said. The term Shia or the term Sunni or whatever it might be, they've become identity tags rather than representing the inside, how we should be on the inside, not just something we are from the outside, you know. And when we understand this, when we try and build ourselves beyond just what our identity might be, you know, what others expect of us, but how we see, understand the religion by reading, looking through, analyzing, and understanding for ourselves, as you said, using our intellect, inshallah, that's how we can truly build. Inshallah, with that, we'll proceed to the main lecture for tonight. Please welcome His Eminence, Sheikh Hamid Waqar, with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبو القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Alhamdulillah, as always, honor and a privilege to be here amongst you. Thank you to Brother Hussain and family and everyone involved in inviting me to participate in these programs. It's a big honor of ours. Inshallah, for all the mistakes we've made, please forgive us, and may Allah give you all rewards for all of the hard work you do for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So I wanted to talk about 3 instances where Sayyidah Zainab, salamu alayha, mourned for Imam Hussain alayhi salam. I'm not saying that all 3 of these instances took place, but they're all commonly mentioned stories. So I want to just see what we could learn from them and what we could kind of pick up from them. The first one will be about her sitting down and performing Salatul Layl on the night after Ashura. Second one would be her hitting her head on the pole, or the pole, where they say it's split open. And the third one will be her asking Allah to accept the sacrifice of her brother. So those are three events that are recorded that are in some books of history that took place after the Shahadat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So we'll go in that order as well. So the first one about Salatul Layl, this one is accepted by everybody, right? I haven't seen someone who rejects this story, right? And basically what it says is that Sayyidah Zainab, salam alayha, after the tragedies that happened in Karbala, still didn't forego this recommended action. But she did pray it differently. So normally she would pray Salatul Layl standing, but in this case, on this night, she prayed it sitting. And that's been recorded in history. Now I just wanted to touch upon Salatul Layl just a little bit, and maybe from what we are going to cover, we'll learn two things. Why is it that Sayyidah Zainab performed this prayer? It wasn't wajib upon her, she didn't have to, but why did she elect to perform this prayer on that night and every other night? And also, inshallah, to motivate myself and everyone else to perform this prayer once in a while. Not saying you have to do it every night, once in a while, inshallah. Okay? So, when I was in Qom, the teachers of Islamic akhlaq, Islamic spirituality, would say that if we want to reach anywhere when it comes to building our connection and our relationship with God, this is the mustahab act that we have to cling to. So obviously the foundation is taqwa, which we described before. It's performing our wajibat, staying away from the muharramat. But then if we want to take that next step, right, out of all of the mustahab actions that are listed in the Tawzi Masail or listed in other books, so many of them, this is the one to cling to. And then other ones after that. But make sure we do this one. Many ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. One who performs Salatul Layl regularly is protected during the daytime. So maybe something bad was going to happen to you, and because you perform Salatul Layl, Allah removed that from you. Right? So there's a protection there, which is good. And obviously we would never know until the difficulty hits us the day that we didn't perform Salatul Layl, right? We never know what would have hit us if we, on the days that we did perform Salatul Layl, who knows? Who knows what Allah is protecting us from? Another one, kafara for the sins of the day. Now obviously that's not a green light to sin, but it means if you perform Salatul Layl, that will be a form of forgiveness for you, right? If you made a mistake and fell and succumbed to your lower desires, right? Not intentionally, not saying, oh, I'm going to sin and perform Salatul Layl because I'll make up for it. Not with that intention. But if you make a mistake, this is one of the reasons why, inshallah, Allah will forgive you. The house in which Salatul Layl is performed beams with light for those who are in the heavens, just as the stars beam with light for those who are on earth. So when you look up into the sky, especially when you're camping somewhere away from the city, you see all those stars, see how prominent they are, right? For those in the heavens, looking down on earth, the houses where Salatul Layl are performed are like those stars, right? So there's nur that comes from your house. That means not only are you benefiting from it, but the people who are in your house are also benefiting. The great and noble people of our nation are those who are protectors of the Quran and who stay awake in the night to worship. Right? So it's another inference to Salatul Layl. More traditions. Salatul Layl makes one's face beautiful, beautifies one's etiquette, so it helps them in their akhlaq, in their ethics. Gives a nice smell to one's body, and increases daily sustenance, so it increases your wealth as well. It also removes sorrow and grief and gives strength to the eyes. So a lot of interesting rewards for Salatul Layl. And if we struggle to perform Salatul Layl, there's a hadith that say that committing sins is one of the reasons why. And if you're struggling, you make the intention, I want to perform Salatul Layl, but then at night you don't wake up, or you become lazy and you don't do it, or whatever the reason is, right? One of the possible causes is because of sins we're performing. So if we make that intention to stay away from sins for a few days, then I bet you it'll be a lot easier to perform Salatul Layl. Right? So if that's something you really want to do, it's a way to get to it. Right? Do it with that purpose. Say, Allah, I'm not going to commit sin so I could worship you at night. And I guarantee you that'll be a way that'll make it easier for you. Okay? Salatul Layl, I'm sure you guys pray it more than I do. There's an easy way of doing it. You pray 11 rakats, right? There's 4 2-rakat prayers, just like Salatul Fajr. Just you knock them out one after each other with the intention of Salatul Layl. Then you have the 5th 2-rakat salat, and you do that with the intention of Salatul Shaf. And there's no qunut in this one, right? So there's a difference. You don't use a qunut. And then you have the 1 rakat, right? The 11th rakat. And this 1 rakat is Salatul Witr, and this is the most important one. There's even some ulama say that if you can't do all of them, just do this one. And even if you missed it, do it qada during the daytime. Right? So you wanted to perform it at night, you slept, you couldn't wake up, do it as a qada of Salatul Layl, at least this 1 rakat. Surah Fatiha, Ikhlas 3 times, Falak, Nas. In the Qunut, you recite a lot of things, right? I'm doing the quick version, you can make it longer, it's up to you. Astaghfirullah, Rabbi wa atubu ilayh 70 times. Astaghfirullah alladhi la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyu al-qayyum wa atubu ilayh 7 times. Pray for 40 believers. Al-af, al-af, al-af. And then there's a supplication. Rabbi ikfirli warhamni watub alayhi innaka anta tawwabur rahim. Very simple, takes all up, could take you 20 minutes. Right? But 20 minutes to separate you from a normal Muslim into one of the strong believers and one of the strong followers. Because Salatul Layl is a tawfiq that not everyone has. And if you're able to pray it, Allah is shining His light of mercy upon you. So that's the first one. A little encouragement, inshallah. Second one is a little different. So the second instance that's recorded in history is when Sayyidah Zainab hits her head on a pole, and her head starts to bleed. Right? This is recorded in the hadith book that we have called Bihar al-Anwar, which is compiled by Allama Majlisi. It's 100 and I forgot how many exact volumes, but over 100 volumes. It's a huge compilation of traditions, right? And in this is this tradition. When the women were taken captive and taken to Kufa, the head of Imam Hussain alayhi salam was paraded in public. Right? So it was on a spear, paraded in public. Zainab, salam alayha, when seeing her brother's head, hit her own head against a pole of the carriage that she was in, which caused it to bleed. Right? Now, A lot of people use this tradition in order to support their own interpretation of how to mourn for Imam Hussain. So people who like to shed their blood with either, the Pakistanis with the zanjir, where they cut their backs, or some of the Arabs with the sword that they hit on their head, right? They're using this tradition to say that, look, Zainab, Sayyidah Zainab, hit her head and blood came out. So we're just following her lead here. Right? This is what they say. Now, few potential issues with this. First, the tradition, the hadith in itself, is what we call mursal. Right? A tradition that's mursal means that the chain of narrators has a big hole in it. Right? So we have, for instance, a book in Al-Kafi. We'll start with Sheikh Kulaini, who's the author of Al-Kafi. And he'll say, I heard, my father say, who said from Ali ibn Ibrahim, who said from his father, who said from so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so to the Imam. Right? And this is a chain of narrators. So when we're studying the chain of narration, we have to look at each one of these people, and we have to see, what does history say about them? Are they a trustworthy person? Right? We have to find out who each one of these individuals are, and try to recognize whether or not we could trust them or not. Are they people who tell the truth generally? Could they be lying? Let's look at this, right? We also have to check the time that they were alive. Because what if we have one person from, let's say from the 3rd century, narrates from one person from the 1st century. We know there's some people missing there. If we know there's people missing, then how could we determine whether or not they were trustworthy? Because we don't even know their names. We don't know who they are. They've just been lost. This tradition's like that, where there's a big gap between the narrators of this tradition. So we don't know who those people in the middle were. They could have been people who lied. They could have been trustworthy. We don't know. And because we don't know, we can't use a tradition to support anything. Right? Especially if we're trying to look at what Islamic laws are. Because when it comes to Islamic laws, we have to use traditions that are strong. That we could say between me and God, I feel that the Imam said this. But this tradition is not that, because it's mursal. So that's one big problem. So when we say that the tradition's weak, we can't use it to support zanjir or tatbir or anything. So the argument just completely goes away. But there's more. Ayatollah Fazl Lankarani, may Allah raise his status, he said, we did not discover an authentic narration regarding the mentioned incident. So not only is this tradition not authentic, there's no other tradition that supports such a thing. We have nothing from authentic sources where Sayyidah Zainab hit her head. Ayatollah Muharram Shirazi, and he's still alive, one of the top Maraja of Qom, he says, the authenticity of this narration is not proof for us. So don't just take my word as it's a mursal tradition. Here's Maraja who are saying it, right? Not proven for us. But even if we do accept that it happened, let's say, for argument's sake, this did happen. This cannot be used as a religious argument for tatbir. So even if it did happen, even if Sayyidah Zainab did hit her head on a pole, doesn't mean we could do tatbir. But it didn't happen. Tradition's weak, but doesn't matter. Either way, it's not an argument, right? Muhaddith Qawmi, who is a very famous scholar in the history of Islam, he rejected this tradition in a book called Muntahal al-Amal, and he said, this narration, although Allama Majlisi transmitted it in Bahar al-Anwar, however, the source of the transmission is from the two books, Muntakhab al-Turayhi and Nur al-Ain. The status of these two books are clear to the people of Hadith, meaning that these two books, nothing in them is reliable. Forget about this one tradition. All of them. You can't use any of these books. Right? But these are the books that this comes from. Right? So, big attacks on these traditions. But that's not even the only problem of this argument. Because remember, Ayatul Makram Shirazi said, even if it did happen, it's not an argument for tatbir. Right? So, how could he say that? First, if this was a good action and was virtuous, Sayyidah Zainab would not have only done it once. Why did she only do it one time then? Why didn't she do it every year? Why didn't she do it over and over again? Why is it only one time she does it? Right? So if this is such a virtuous action, why do we only have it recorded one time in history? Doesn't make sense. Right? So that's one problem. Another problem, we have a pretty strong tradition where Imam Hussain alayhi salam is speaking to Sayyidah Zainab on the night before Ashura. And Sayyidah Zainab is upset because she heard Imam Hussain alayhi salam make a comment that she understood that the Imam knows he's going to die the next day. So Sayyidah Zainab starts to cry. And she starts to become emotional. Right? As you would. And Imam Hussain alayhi salam consoles her and reminds her, don't scratch your face, don't tear your clothes, don't go overboard. So it would seem like if she went and then the next day she's hitting her head against a pole, it seems like you're not listening to what the Imam's saying. And that seems unlikely. Right? That's an unlikely scenario. More. All right. Sayyidah Zainab, if this is virtuous and she did it, why don't we have the Imams doing it? Why don't we have any traditions that state Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam after he gained strength? Imam Bakr alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq, any of the Imams. We don't have it. If this was virtuous, why wouldn't they be doing it? There are some people who say, well, they did it in private, but come on. If they did it, if it's a virtuous act and you're trying to teach mankind how to mourn for Imam Hussain, why would you do it in private? Right? This is the Imam whose job is to teach, whose job is to guide. Right? They weren't shy about mourning for Imam Hussain, about crying, about bringing reciters to recite poetry, about public displays of mourning. They didn't shy away from that. Why would they do this one act in public or in private? Doesn't make sense, right? We can't be holier than the Pope, right? We can't say, I'm going to do something that's the Imams didn't even do themselves in order to get closer to God. It doesn't work like that. There's a sermon from Imam Ali alayhi salam in Najul Balagha. Sermon number 96, if you guys want to look it up and read it. Imam Ali alayhi salam says this: look at the people of the Prophet's family. Observe them. Adhere to their direction. Follow their footsteps, because they would never lead you out of guidance. They would never throw you into destruction. If they sit down, you sit down. If they stand up, you stand up. Do not go ahead of them, for if you do, you'll go astray. And don't lag behind them. Because if you do, you'll be ruined. What a beautiful tradition. Right? We take the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam as role models. We mourn how they mourn. Right? We don't go do overboard and start doing things that are unheard of. Right? Stick to them. Don't go in front. Don't lag behind. Do what they do. Pretty clear. Now, also just some people like to throw this in there as well. I don't know how many times you've hit your head against a pole, hopefully not too often, right? But you have to hit it very hard to split open your forehead for blood to come out. Not an easy task, right? It's not something that if you just hit your head, it's going to happen, right? There has to be an enormous amount of force, which is unlikely after Sayyidah Zainab is chained and not eating well and dragged from here to there, for her to be able to have that strength to be able to accomplish that task. But that's beside the point. All right? Now, let's look at some fatwas from some of the ulama, and then we'll go on to the last bit. And this is about the zanjir with the blades on it, or the kamazani with the swords, right? Sayyid Khoy, who's of the previous, I guess now it'd probably be 2 generations ago, but he's, no, still one. I guess Sayyid Sistani's teacher, so 1 generation. Sayyid Khoy says this: if blood matam and hitting oneself with chains, which are practiced in Muharram, cause serious harm, where we know some people have actually died from this, but if it causes serious harm, or if it causes ridicule to the religion and the sect and Shiaism, it's impermissible. So he's saying if one of these 2 things happens, substantial harm or wahna Muslimin or wahna Islam, it makes Islam look bad. Right? If that's happening, it's impermissible. This action has not been mentioned anywhere in the Sharia. So there's no religious support of this action whatsoever. Not only that, in the case where it becomes a source of mockery of the Shias, it becomes haram. So even if some people just use that to make fun of Shias, which they do, it becomes haram. All right? Sayyid Khoy, pretty clear fatwa. Sayyid Sistani, the philosophy of mourning during Ashura is to respect the symbols of religion and to remember the suffering of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, to remember the suffering of his companions, and to remember his uprising to defend Islam and prevent the destruction of the religion by Bani Umayyah, by the Umayyad dynasty. These rites must be done in such a way that in addition to serving that purpose, it draws the attention of others to these lofty goals. So not only when we're mourning, we should be using our mourning to remind ourselves of that, we should also use it as a method to attract others to the religion. Right? So those actions which are not understandable, right, which other cultures cannot fathom, just don't get, and cause misinterpretations and contempt for the religion must be avoided. Right? So he doesn't mention it clearly here, but if you read between the lines, I think you can understand that. Imam Khomeini, you want to do something for Allah, but in the situations where your actions might harm Islam, refraining is the best. You might have great intentions, but you're harming Islam here, don't do it. Instead, participate in chest beating processions, so in Sinazani, right? Endeavor to hold these events with greater glory. Do that. You don't have to cut yourselves. If such actions bring about disrepute to the religion, then they're haram, they're forbidden. And the last one we'll read, Sayyid Khamenei. In addition to the fact that it's not held in the common view as manifestations of mourning and grief. So in the common understanding, right, cutting yourself like that isn't considered an act of grief. Let's say your father passes away, your mother dies. Are you going to go get Zanjir and cut your back? I haven't heard of people doing that. Not saying it never happened in the course of history, but not something I've heard of. It's not a common thing, right? If you lose a job, are you going to go cut your head? Right? No. Right? It's not an act that's understood of mourning outside of this, right? So it's just not. It has no precedent during the lifetime of the Imams. So it didn't occur. Nowhere for us to see. And even after that, right? There's some history books that say it didn't start until the 1800s. So for a long time, there's no mention of this. Or maybe the late 1700s, but a long time. And we have not received any tradition quoted from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam about any support for this act, be it privately or publicly. This practice would, at the present time, give others a bad image of our sect. Therefore, in no way is it considered permissible. All right, so pretty clear from our major ulama that this act is not something that we should be doing, and definitely not something encouraged by Sayyidah Zainab Salaam alayha. Right? All right. Third one. And this one, only because Brother Hussain wanted me to mention a little bit more here. So with this one, let's slowly bring our hearts to Karbala. And I want you to picture the scene, right? Think about it in your head. Imagine it. This is after all of the shuhada have made their sacrifice. The enemies have come. As Brother Hussain was mentioning yesterday, they abused the children of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Sayyidah Zainab salam alayha was running around protecting all of the people that she could. But that night passed. Sayyidah Zainab prayed Salatul Layl. She's now chained with her hands tied behind her back. She's sitting next to the body of Imam Hussain, the headless body of Imam Hussain. And she says, Allahumma aqbil hadha al-qurban. Allah, accept this sacrifice from us. Now go back a little bit, because this is where it's going to hit you. Rewind a little bit. You rewind, you're going back, you see shimmer on the chest of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But keep going. You see Abdullah run, trying to stop Shimmer from attacking, and Shimmer cutting off his arm. Keep going back. You see Ali Askar. Keep going. You see Abbas. I want you to stay with Sayyid Abbas. Stay there for a second. Remember how he's sitting on the river and he's cupping the water in his hands. And then he puts it down, he doesn't drink it. He puts the pouch over his shoulders, gets on the horse, and is trying to get back to Sayyidah Sakina. What happens to him? Right? The enemies surround him. On one side, they chop his right arm off. Other side, the left arm. Shoots the arrow in his head. And that one mal'oon hits him and he falls onto the floor, but he doesn't have arms to break his fall. There's no arms. What happens? Hits the floor face first. Now fast forward back to Sayyidah Zainab. Where did I say Sayyidah Zainab's hands were? tied behind her back. This is when all of the captured are being dragged out of Karbala. They have this area that they call the Qatl-Gah, the place where all of the shuhada, their bodies are. Right? Their bodies are there. Imam Hussain is there. The captives are walking slowly down. Sayyidah Zainab breaks away and runs to her brother. As she's running, she gets close to the body of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and she falls. But she didn't have hands because they were tied behind her back. She fell face first into the body of her brother, just like Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Now please, let's recite 3 salawats for Brother Hussain to come up.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, as always, for tonight and all of the previous nights, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Hamid. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and reward you eternally. Indeed, we've learned so much from those nights about Karbala and about how those lessons link to the practical realities and injustices of today. Tonight you were mentioning about how sometimes the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, they try to go ahead of their necessary responsibilities and others they lag behind. It brings back to mind Ghadir, where the Holy Prophet was traveling back towards Medina after his farewell pilgrimage to Mecca. At this point, some of the people are ahead, some of them are behind, and the Holy Prophet orders Bilal radiallahu anhu to gather them in the middle. It's the very same thing. Find that center point, and you find it in Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, and that is whom Ghadir was for. And as we always mention, if it had not been for the Muslims forgetting Ghadir, not reflecting on Ghadir the way they should have, then the tragedy of Karbala would never have taken place. Now, oftentimes in our lives, we constantly judge others. For example, those who do not attend Muharram programs, those who do not attend Dua Kumail, those who, for instance, might not even pray or fast or recite the Quran, those who might be engaging in haram activities on a consistent basis. But this is a very dangerous thing, because we do not know what tomorrow will bring. Tomorrow, perhaps that person can become a pious, God-fearing believer, whereas you can become someone unrighteous, someone unworthy. And through the examples that Sheikh Hamid was mentioning, we saw this. Zubair, Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas, on the right path, but then towards the end, things change. Hur, Zuhair, the exact opposite, on the wrong path. Zuhair was a person who fought against Imam Ali at Siffin. Hur was part of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad's army. And look how things ended up. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, in order to further accentuate this point, think back to the example of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. When he is in Egypt, when he is in the court of the Aziz, he is constantly being chased around by Zulaykha. She is trying to seduce him. She is attracted to him because Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, as the traditions say, he was an extremely beautiful and attractive person. Some traditions mention, the traditions say that when Allah created Prophet Yusuf, He gave him half of the beauty of mankind, and the other half He distributed amongst the rest of mankind. That's how beautiful he was, beyond our imagination. Zulaykha was in love with him, and she wanted to seduce him as a result. Now ultimately, Zulaykha's actions became public knowledge. When they became public knowledge, the women of Egypt, particularly the nobility, the noble class, they condemned her. They defamed her constantly. Her reputation was ruined. She was shamed and disgraced. And she became miserable as a result. Ultimately, however, she discovered some way to redeem herself. She gathered a lot of these women in a banquet. In this banquet, she places unpeeled fruits on the table along with a knife to peel them. Now the women, they sit down, they pick up the knives. When they pick up the knives, on the other side of the door, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam walks in. The moment they see him, they're so mesmerized, they're dumbstruck by his beauty, transfixed at the sight of Prophet Yusuf, this amazing and attractive person. And in their distraction, they cut their own hands. At this point, Zulaykha spins everything back around on them. She says to them, "You looked at him once, and this is what you did. I had to encounter him time after time after time, and yet you condemned me." The moral of the story here is, if you condemn someone when you haven't faced the same trials that they have, when you haven't faced the same challenges, you're in no position to condemn them. You do not know how you would have acted in their stead unless you've experienced it yourself. Now the same thing can be applied to Karbala. As the Sheikh always mentions, 72 out of 40,000, that's a very difficult trial. Again, the women of Egypt at that dinner table, compared to Zulaykha, their trial was relatively easy. Our trials in this life are relatively easy, and yet we repeatedly fail. A lot of times. There are times when we succeed, and inshallah we can build our success rate through the remembrance of Karbala. But the point is, if we cannot succeed in these easier trials, how can we succeed in a more difficult trial where only 72 out of 40,000 can succeed? That's the question we should always ask ourselves. We curse and condemn the enemies of Imam al-Hussain, rightfully so. Every Ashura we recite the Amal. We recite Ziyarat Ashura. Allahumma al'an awwala zalimin zalama haqqa Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma khussa anta awwala zalimin bil-la'ni. Allahumma al'an qatalat al-Hussain wa awladihi wa ashabihi. May Allah curse every one of them. Yet even as we curse, we should always ask ourselves the question, are we behaving like the people that we are cursing? Are we spineless and cowardly when it comes to standing up for the truth? When falsehood and tyranny are in the majority, are we part of that ignorant majority? Or are we silent in the face of the oppression? If we act like this, then how can we say that we would have joined the cause of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam? Again, we have to reflect upon these things. Imam al-Hussain was the kind of person who was kind, gentle, loving, and generous, even towards his enemies. Even when the army of Hur came, 1,000 soldiers, thirsty, Imam al-Hussain gave them water from his own reserves. That's how loving he was. Knowing that at a later stage, he would be denied the water. His family would suffer from thirst for days upon days upon days. Sukaina would scream, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. Ali al-Asghar alayhi salam, in the quest for quenching his thirst, he would be shot with a 3-pronged arrow in the throat. All of the companions of Karbala would be slaughtered mercilessly. These blessed individuals, these brave warriors, despite their generosity, despite their love and kindness. Again, how can we possibly measure up unless we're willing to reflect and make changes in our lives? We mentioned before, are we the kind who would speak truth when faced with a tyrannical majority? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad. When we look upon Sayyida Zainab Salamullahu alayha, she is the kind of person who did speak truth despite the odds that were stacked against her. Just imagine being in that position. Your brother has been slaughtered. Your beloved Qasim ibn al-Hassan has been trampled to pieces. Your beloved Ali Asghar has been shot through the neck with an arrow. Your beloved Ali Akbar has his chest torn open with a spear, and your beloved Abbas has his hands cut off and an arrow through his eye. They suffered so greatly, and in the aftermath of Karbala, when Imam al-Hussain was killed by the accursed Shimr, La'natullah alayh, the women and children were left defenseless, and we discussed last night all of the sufferings that they endured at the hands of these treacherous, cowardly individuals. Sukaina had her earrings ripped off. She cried as the blood fell from her ears, crying for her father, Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. The tents were burning, and the women and children were scattering around. No safety or refuge for them. They suffered and they suffered, forced to look upon the heads of their near ones. And despite all of this, one would imagine this is what Zainab has been enduring, seeing all of this, falling upon her face, as the Sheikh mentioned, falling upon the body of her beloved Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. And yet, Sayyida Zainab, in this situation, one would imagine that someone would be traumatized. They would be subdued to the point of no return. They would tell the enemy, please take no more. You've taken all that you can from me. I'll do anything. Spare me. Spare what little I have left. But not Sayyida Zainab salamullahu alayha. In the face of all of this, she tells Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad la'natullah alayhi, when he tells her, how did you find the way Allah treated your brother and his family? She replies, ما رأيت إلا جميلة. I saw nothing but beauty. Because in the sacrifice of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, there was something beautiful. All of the lessons, all of the virtues that were displayed, all of the perfect behavior, everything, it would inspire a revolution, and it would cause the religion of Islam to be resurrected at a time where these people had tried to kill it. Sayyida Zainab looks upon the Kufans, the people of Kufa, and she begins to condemn them one after another. Her speech is so powerful, her sermon. The people of Kufa are plagued with guilt, knowing what they have done, betrayed Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam. They begin to cry. But how much worth do their tears have after what they did? Either by joining Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad or by abandoning their promise to Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. Sayyida Zainab salamullahu alayha had such a powerful impact upon these people, and Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad could see this, and he began to panic. He grew terrified. And as a result of this, he hastened to transfer the prisoners to Damascus, to Yazid la'natullah alayh, because he knew that if Sayyida Zainab continued speaking, she would bring ruin upon him. What he didn't know was that his seeds of destruction had already been sowed by Sayyida Zainab. By delivering that powerful sermon, just like her mother. This is Zainab. Zain, it means jewel. Ab, it means father. She is the jewel, the ornament, the adornment of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the bravest of the brave. She is the legacy of her mother Fatima al-Zahra salamullahu alayha. And when Bibi Fatima was in Masjid al-Nabawi, when Fadak was taken from the Ahlul Bayt, she delivered such a powerful sermon, and it reduced the masses to tears. And this was the exact same thing that Sayyida Zainab was doing. By doing this, again, she set about the destruction of these cursed people. And years later, this led to the uprising of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi radiyallahu anhu, who took revenge for the Ahlul Bayt. Umar ibn Sa'ad, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, Shimr, Harmala, all of these cursed people, they all faced justice at the end because of the power of Sayyida Zainab. Imam al-Hussain sacrificed himself, but Zainab salamullahu alayha was the voice of this sacrifice. She was the tongue, as was Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. The key takeaways from Muharram, insha'Allah, are to try and improve our lives little by little, building our characters, reading through the examples of these great personalities, learning about them, all of the lessons that they demonstrate. And insha'Allah ta'ala, learning about the practical injustices today, which Sheikh Hamid went over. Insha'Allah, if we can do that, if we can absorb these lessons, that's the biggest takeaway. Not the chest beating or the chanting of the name Hussein. Those are very important, no doubt. But taking away the lessons and embedding them within the core of our hearts, our souls, that is the real victory of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam. And inshallah, we can all be inspired to do exactly that. Please rise as we perform the Noha for tonight. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਉਹ ਮੈਂ ਮਰ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਭੁੱਲਣਾ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਮਰ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਭੁੱਲਣਾ ਗਈ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਨਾ ਦਫਨਾ ਕੇ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਤਤੀ ਰੇਤ ਤੇ ਸਮ ਗਿਆ ਅਕਬਰ ਤਤੀ ਰੇਤ ਤੇ ਸਮ ਗਿਆ ਅਕਬਰ ਨਾਲੇ ਤੂੰ ਗਿਆ ਗਾਜ਼ੀ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਤਤੀ ਰੇਤ ਤੇ ਸਮ ਗਿਆ ਅਕਬਰ ਤਤੀ ਰੇਤ ਤੇ ਸਮ ਗਿਆ ਅਕਬਰ ਨਾਲੇ ਟੁਰ ਗਿਆ ਗਾਜ਼ੀ ਪਿਆ ਪੱਥਰਾਂ ਹੇਠ ਹੈ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਵੀਰ ਨਮਾਜ਼ੀ ਆ ਜ਼ੈਨਬ ਕੂ ਅਸਵਾਰ ਕਰਾਂ ਆ ਜ਼ੈਨਬ ਕੂ ਅਸਵਾਰ ਕਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਰਬਲ ਬਾਬਾ ਕੇ ਹਾਏ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਆ ਵੇਖ ਜ਼ਰਾ ਫਰਵਾਦਾ ਜੋ ਬਾਬਾ ਹਾਲੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੰਬੜੀ ਕੂ ਪੇ ਲੱਭਦੇ ਹੱਥ ਮਹਿੰਦੀਆਂ ਵਾਲੇ ਆ ਹੱਥ ਲੱਭ ਬਨ ਰੇ ਕਾਸਮ ਦੇ ਆ ਹੱਥ ਲੱਭ ਬਨ ਰੇ ਕਾਸਮ ਦੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੂੰ ਮਕਤਲ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਹਾਏ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਾਸ਼ ਤੇ ਰੋਵਨ ਦੇਂਦੇ ਪੇ ਜ਼ਾਲਮ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਓ ਜੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਏ ਮੈਂਡਾ ਦੀ ਆਖੇ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਰਜ ਰੋਵਾਂ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਰਜ ਰੋਂਦਾ ਵਾਰੀ ਜਾਵੀਂ ਮੈਂ ਰਜ ਰੋਵਾਂ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਵਾਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੇਰੇ ਗਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਾਵਾਂ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਹਾਏ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਟੁਰ ਚੱਲੀਆਂ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਬਾਬਾ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ ਸ਼ਲਾ ਨਾ ਕੋਈ ਮੇਰੇ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਇੰਜ ਲਾਸ਼ ਤੇ ਆਵੇ ਨਾ ਭੈਣ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀਰਨ ਦੀ ਇੰਜ ਉੱਠ ਕੇ ਜਾਵੇ ਉੱਠੀ ਵੀਰ ਦੀ ਲਾਸ਼ ਤੂੰ ਰੋਂਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਉੱਠੀ ਵੀਰ ਦੀ ਲਾਸ਼ ਤੂੰ ਰੋਂਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਵੱਲ ਵੱਲ ਝਿਣਕਾਂ ਖਾ ਕੇ ਹਾਏ ਮੈਂ ਵੀਰ ਕੁਹਾ ਕੇ टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के रियो आप बनेंदा पढ़ दे तू बाबल मेरे संगपूर दे वंजनाए ज़ैनब विच शहर दे तेंडे तेड़ा वेखन संग भर जाइयां तेंडा वेखन संग भर जाइयां हथ कड़ियां रस्सियां पाके हाय मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के उदा मातम जग तेरा हसीता हशर ते जारी जिदी लाश ते नारज रोई एक दर्दा मारी खुर्शीद बचा गया दीन जेड़ा खुर्शीद बचा गया दीन जेड़ा विच सजदे सीस कटा के हाय मैं वीर कटा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के मैं मर के भी नहीं भूलना है मैं मर के भी नहीं भूलना गई वीर कुना दफना के है मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के टुर चलियां शाम नू बाबा मैं वीर कुहा के Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please have a seat so I can recite Sodu Salam. Please have seats. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. वो करबला वो शाम गरीबा वो तीरगी वो ज़ैनब हज़ीं वो हिफाजत ख़याम की आया वो एक सवार करीब ख़याम शाह बेटी अली की गैज़ में सुए फर्स बढ़ी उल्टी नकाब चेहरे से अपने सवार ने पेश निगाहे ज़ैनबे मज़लूम थे अली हर चंद साबिरा थी बहुत बिन्ते फातिमा बेसाख्ता लबों पे फरियाद आ गई ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर अब आए हो बाबा अब आए हो बाबा अब आए हो बाबा ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा, अब आए हो बाबा। जब लुट गया परदेस में अम्मा का भरा घर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा। बाबा अगर आना ही था खालिक की रिज़ा से, उस वक्त ना आए जब खाक पे दम तोड़ रहा था मेरा अकबर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा, अब आए हो बाबा। कट कट के गिरे नहर पे जब बाजुए अब्बास, और कोई ना था पास, उस वक्त सदा आपको देता था दिलावर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा। जब फर्श ज़मीं बाम फलक लर्ज़ां फिरा थे, जब फर्श ज़मीं बामो फलक लर्ज़ां फिशाते, उस वक्त कहाँ थे जब बाप के चुल्लू में था खूने अली असगर। हाय जब बाप के चुल्लू में था खूने अली असगर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा। जब भाई का सर कटता था मैं देख रही थी, हजरत को सदा दी, सर खोले हुए रोती थी मैं ख़ैमे के दर पर। हाय सर खोले हुए रोती थी मैं ख़ैमे के दर पर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा, अब आए हो बाबा। जब लोग बचा ले गए लाशे शुहदा के, हक अपना जता के, बस एक तन शबीर था पामाली की जिद पर, अब आए हो बाबा। हाय बस एक तने शबीर था पामाली की जिद पर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा जब बाली सकीना के जोहर खींच लिए गए, लगते थे तमाचे हसरत से मुझे देखती थी बानुए मुज़तर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप से कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा। ज़ैनब ने कहा बाप के कदमों से लिपट कर, अब आए हो बाबा, अब आए हो बाबा। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद। Please rise everyone so we can have ziyarah now. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alayka ya Nabiyullah, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah, Assalamu alayka ya Hujjatullah, Assalamu alayka ya Ba'ith al-Huda, Assalamu alayka ya Habibullah, Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, Assalamu alayka ya Ibna Rasulillah, Assalamu alayka ya Ibna Amir al-Mu'minina wa Ibna Sayyid al-Wasijin, Assalamu alayka ya Ibna Fatimah al-Zahra hi Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alameen, Assalamu alayka ya Mawlaya wa ala ansarika al-mustashhadina ma'aka jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا مغيث الشيعة والزوار في يوم الجزاء، السلام عليك يا أنيس النفوس، السلام عليك يا أيها المدفون بأرض توس، السلام عليك وعلى آبائك السبعة وأبنائك الأربعة ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا قامع الكفر والطغيان، السلام عليك يا دافع الظلم والعدوان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. دعاء إمام الزمانة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقاعدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم لعن قتلة الحسين وأولاد الحسين وصحاب الحسين.